The bridge between worlds. James Morley stood on the edge of the cliff, his eyes tracing the winding river below, its surface smooth like a mirror in the early morning light. The project was supposed to be simple. A bridge, nothing too extraordinary, nothing too complicated. He had been an engineer for years, but this was different. The land had always felt like a boundary, a place where things separated, where dreams were divided. And yet, here he was, standing at the precipice, trying to unite two halves of a city with nothing but steel and concrete. The city had always been divided. North of the river was a prosperous community, flourishing with wealth and opportunity. To the south, however, there was a darker world, a place where shadows seemed to creep, where people lived without the light of the sun, where the town was as much of a myth as it was a reality. James had been tasked with building a bridge that would link the two sides, a bridge that would connect not just physical spaces, but the lives and the hearts of the people. But as much as he tried, he couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong, that something was lurking in the air, just beyond his reach, waiting for him to fail. In the beginning, he had spent months poring over blueprints, designing a structure that was supposed to be a marvel of engineering. He had consulted with experts, studied the terrain, and done everything by the book. Yet, when the first test run came, the bridge collapsed dramatically, tragically, and completely. The failure was instantaneous. The ground trembled, and the sound of snapping steel echoed through the valley. It was a disaster. But James didn't give up. Instead of retreating into himself, he spent the next weeks analyzing every mistake, every misstep, and every error that had led to the failure. The engineers around him were quick to abandon the project, convinced that it was too dangerous, too ambitious, and too costly to even think about rebuilding. But James knew there was something more to this project. He felt it in his bones. It wasn't just about engineering. It was about connection, about bridging something far deeper than geography. Late one night, after hours of staring at the same set of plans, James found himself staring into the reflection of his own tired face in the glass of his office window. He had never thought of himself as someone who could be affected by a failure, but there was something about the bridge that gnawed at him. It wasn't just the technical aspects. There was something supernatural about it. A voice, a whisper, one that had been there since the first failure, continued to plague him. It wasn't until that night, as he wrestled with the silence of the room, that he realized the voice was tied to the land itself. The river below the cliff had always been more than just a body of water. It was a symbol, a force that had both divided and united, a link between worlds that no one understood. As the days passed, James began to have vivid dreams. He dreamt of walking along the river, not on solid ground, but on the water itself. The river stretched out before him, winding in ways that no river should. It was a river of dreams and nightmares, of truth and illusion. And as he walked, he saw things, visions of a woman, a figure so beautiful that it took his breath away, with hair as dark as the night and eyes that seemed to pierce right through him. She would stand by the river, watching him with an enigmatic smile, as if she knew something he didn't. But there was another part to the dream, a darker part, where the water began to rise, the river itself swelling with a dark force that seemed to call to him. It wasn't just water, it was alive with whispers, with promises, and with warnings. The river was a boundary, but it was more than that. It was a reflection of the division in his own heart. The part of him that wanted to escape, to run from the pressure of expectations, and the part that believed in the power of connection, of unity. He woke from these dreams every morning with a sense of foreboding, but also with a strange, growing certainty that his bridge was the answer, the key to something beyond his understanding. As weeks turned into months, James began to notice changes in himself. He was growing more distant from his colleagues, more obsessed with the bridge. They told him it wasn't possible, that a bridge like the one he envisioned would never be built. But James wasn't listening anymore. The dreams, the whispers, the strange pull of the river, he could feel it all becoming a part of him. And then, as the days drew nearer to the next attempt, something even stranger began to happen. One evening, as he stood on the cliff once more, he saw her, the woman from his dreams. She stood on the opposite bank of the river, looking up at him. The wind stirred the trees around them, the air crackling with an energy he couldn't explain. She smiled, and it was a smile full of secrets, of things left unsaid. She waved, a slow, deliberate motion, and then began to walk toward the water. James felt a compulsion, an overwhelming desire to follow her. Without thinking, he stepped closer to the edge of the cliff, his heart racing. The ground seemed to shift beneath him, the rocks crumbling as if the land itself were inviting him to jump. The river below churned, the waters becoming more restless as the figure moved closer. It was then that James understood. This was no ordinary woman. She was a manifestation of the land itself, a spirit that had existed long before his bridge was even conceived. Without a word, he stepped off the edge of the cliff, falling into the depths of the river below. He didn't know what he expected. Maybe he expected to drown, to be consumed by the very river he sought to bridge. But when he hit the water, it was different. It wasn't cold. It wasn't dark. It was warm, embracing, alive with energy. He sank deeper and deeper, feeling as though he were passing through a portal, through a boundary between the world of the living and something else, something ancient. Suddenly, everything stopped. The current ceased, the pressure lifted. He opened his eyes and found himself in a different world, a place that felt both familiar and strange. The land was lush and vibrant, with towering trees and a sky that seemed to pulse with a golden light. It was a place of dreams and forgotten memories, a place where reality and fantasy intertwined. And there, standing before him, was the woman. She was no longer just a figure. She was the embodiment of everything: the river, the land, the city. She smiled again, and this time, her smile was filled with understanding. "You've crossed the boundary," she said, her voice soft yet powerful. "You've bridged the gap." James didn't know what to say. He had expected answers, but now, standing in this strange world, he was more confused than ever. "The bridge you seek to build," she continued, "isn't just made of stone and steel. It's made of understanding, of connection. You must first bridge the gap within yourself, between your fears and your desires. Only then will the bridge come to life." And in that moment, James understood. The bridge was never meant to be just a physical structure. It was a representation of everything he had ever struggled with. The city, the river, the division between light and dark, north and south. It was all part of the same puzzle, the same story. And he was the one who had to solve it. When he woke, back on the cliffside, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow.
Whispering echoes.